Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swa Padatikam Katashtana Smrite Yasmin Dushkaram Sukaram Bhavet Vismite Viparitam Shat Shri Chaitanya Namamitam. So we're reading from the Srimad Bhagavatam, chapter 10, Canto 10, chapter 11, and we're beginning with the chapter introduction and the verses 1 through 4. Okay, so this chapter is called The Childhood Pastimes of Krishna. Sweet baby Krishna. This chapter describes how the inhabitants of Gokul left Gokul and went to Vrindavan, and how Krishna killed Vatsasura and Bakasura. When the Yamala Arjuna trees fell, they made a tremendous sound like that of falling thunderbolts. Being surprised, Krishna's father, Nanda, and the other elderly inhabitants of Gokul went to the spot where they saw the fallen trees and Krishna standing between them, bound by the ulukala, the wooden mortar. They could find no cause for the trees having fallen and Krishna's being there. They thought that this might be the work of some asura who had met Krishna on this spot. And they inquired from the playmates of Krishna about how this incident had taken place. The children properly described how everything had happened, but the elderly persons could not believe the story. Some of them, however, thought it might be true, since they have already seen so many wonderful incidences in connection with Krishna. Anyway, Nanda Maharaj immediately released Krishna from the ropes. In this way, Krishna, at every day, at every moment, displayed wonderful incidences to increase the parental affection of Nanda Maharaj and Yashoda, who thus felt both surprise and joy. The breaking of the Yamal Arjuna trees was one of these wonderful pastimes. One day, a fruit vendor approached Nanda Maharaj's house, and Krishna gathered some fruit grapes with his little palms and went to the vendor to exchange the grain for fruit. On the way, almost all of the grain fell from his palms, only one or two of these grains remaining. But the fruit vendor, out of affection, accepted these grains in exchange for as much as fruit as Krishna could take. We all know this painting because it's right there in the Bhakti Center. As soon as she did this, her basket became filled with gold and jewels. When Dinabandhu Prabhu was telling this story at the pastime place where this is taking place, he said that she took the jewels on her head, and then when she went to the river, she threw all the jewels in the river. And she just kept on singing, Govinda Madhava, Govinda Damodar Madhaveti. Thereafter, all the elderly Gopas decided to leave Gokul because they saw that in Gokul there was always some disturbance. They decided to go to Vrindavan, Vrajdam. On the next day, they all departed. In Vrindavan, both Krishna and Balaram, after finishing their childhood pastimes, began to take charge of the calves and send them to the pasturing grounds. Go Charana. So what is that, the name of that age when he starts to take care of the calves? Who can say it? Komara. And I was just reading in the Gopal Champu how, so there is like these simultaneous pastimes. So the Gopal Champu has this pastime where Krishna goes back to Vrindavan and he marries Srimati Radharani and all the gopis. And it's described there that after Krishna left Vrindavan, the Gopas, by their own will, caused their age not to go past Kumar age. So they stayed between like 5 and 14, just waiting for Krishna to come back. And then their marriages took place. After Krishna got married, then they started to grow, past the cowherd boy age. Okay, during this time, a demon named Vatsasura entered among the calves and was killed. And another asura in the shape of a big duck. Was that there's that bird, something wide beak crane. It looks like a total scary demon bird. Does anybody know which one I'm talking about? I think they featured it on the Wisdom of the Sages. It's quite a deadly bird. When I see that, I'm like, oh, Bakasura. Very scary looking.
Shoe something. Shoe.
Yeah.
It's something with shoe bill something. Like that.
Oh.
Scary creature.
Yeah, it looks like a scary Muppet. He's got little Muppet eyes. The playmates of Krishna narrated all these stories to their mothers. The mothers could not believe their children, Krishna's playmates. But because of full affection, they enjoyed these narrations of Krishna's activities. So that brings us to text 1. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Shri Shukovacha. Gopanandaya Shutva Drumayo Patatoravam Tatra Jagmum Kurusheshta Nirgata Bhaya Sankitaha. Shukadeva Goswami continued, O Maharaj Parikshit, when the Yamal Arjuna trees fell, all the cowherd men in the neighborhood, hearing the fierce sound and fearing thunderbolts, went to the spot. And Acharyas described that Sukadeva Goswami is actually being really pulled into the story himself, and so he's saying, "Oh, Kuru Sheshta," he's feeling like this fear also for Krishna's protection, and so he when he's speaking to Parikshit Maharaj, he's speaking to him as like, okay, you're the Shrestha means, what does it say? That Shrestha is best of Shrestha, best of, yeah, best of the Kurus. So like, oh, you are a Kshatriya, you can go and save Krishna. So he's just being pulled into that mood, just telling the pastime. Bhum yam nipatito tatra drashur yamalarjuna bhabramum stad avigyaya lakshya patata karanam. There they saw the fallen Yamalajuna trees on the ground, and they were bewildered, because even though they could directly perceive that the trees had fallen, they could not trace out the cause of having done so. Purport. Considering all these circumstances, had this been done by Krishna? He was standing on the spot. His playmates described this had been done by him. Had Krishna actually done this, or were these merely stories? This was a cause of bewilderment. Oh, this makes me think of a purport by Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, and Prabhupada repeats the same message. I think it is 2nd Canto, 7th chapter, last verse. I'm guessing. This is just like there's this.
Hare Krishna. Hi guys, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Hi guys. Hello. saying hi to the ducks. All right, so in this purport by Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, he expresses how it's important for the devotee who is not yet liberated from material attachments. Raise your hand if you're not yet liberated from material attachments. Anybody here? Any souls here? Not yet liberated? Oh, Akiko-san's icon, just raising your hand, even though it's just the So he says, if you're not yet liberated from material attachments, then there is a preference of hearing about the Lord in his external lila versus his internal lila. So what is external lila? Any guess? Krishna's interaction with his external energy. So you have the three Vishnus, the Purushas, how he's manifesting the universes, understanding that we're not this body. Basically everything in the first 9 cantos, or everything in the Bhagavad Gita, everything in Prabhupada's lectures. You see, there's not an avoidance of hearing about Krishna's internal lila, but there is a preference of hearing about Krishna's external lila, his interaction with material energy. Actually, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, the way he translates the verse is he said, if you hear about Krishna's interactions with Maya, you will then become free from Maya. So if you hear about Krishna's interactions with the external energy, then you will become free from that influence of the external energy. And we, of course, we want to know, we have to have some attraction. So we have to hear about his internal pastimes. But there is, when it comes to a scale of preference and like how much we hear of what, there is a preference to hear about the external lila. Like in Srila Prabhupada's time, there was devotees who decided to read not obscure books written by random authors found in Loy Bazaar, hired authors. No, they were reading only Srila Prabhupada's books. And it was, the men would go to one group, the women would go to another group, and they would separately sit together and they would read Krishna's pastimes with the gopis. And they would read, they would read in Chaitanya Charitamrita or Srimad Bhagavatam, Krishna book. And Srimad Bhagavatam 10th Canto was not out yet, unless they, and they would separately read. And they were chastised by Srila Prabhupada. The name was given was the Gopi Bhava Club. And they said, but Prabhupada, we heard that we become purified by this reading. And Prabhupada said, no, you become putrefied. So there is a preference to always become grounded in our actual experience, that we are experiencing our interactions with the external energy. So therefore we have to have things that bring us to this external, the understanding of how that external energy operates and its connection with Krishna. Now one may say, well, I must be, maybe I'm not controlled by the external energy, because when I hear Krishna's pastimes, I relish them. Maybe I'm a pure devotee. Maybe I'm like just a step away from Jesus Christ. And so in Krishna book, Prabhupada introduces Krishna book. He says that everyone is attracted by Krishna's pastimes. This is even the materialists. They want to hear a beautiful love story, some action, some romance. So the attraction is not necessarily showing our degree of development of Krishna consciousness, but we see our development of Krishna consciousness is shown by this viraktir, the indifference, the detachment from material energy. It's like a verse from the Bhagavatam 11th canto. Bhakti Parineshwana Bhava Vraktir Anyatra Chaisha Chika Eka Kala Yatat Prapadyamanashtus Tushti Pushti Shipaya Anugasham. So three things happen with each successive bite of food. You're getting some nourishment, you're getting to taste it, and something goes away. What's that? Your hunger. So similarly, bhakti with each successive progressive step, each successive connection with Krishna, there's virakti, there's some detachment, some indifference. Actually, it's not a sense of aversion, but a complete indifference to material energy, to that external energy. So that is the real test. So we hear these pastimes because we need some kind of some aspiration of, why are we doing all this? We definitely want to be there. We want to be in engaging in the service of the servants of Krishna. We want to be able to immerse ourselves in these pastimes, but the external energy pastimes, they are also the pastimes. Somebody said, "Oh, I just want to hear the pastimes." Krishna's interaction with this world is also the pastimes. So it's Krishna's liberation of all the souls, his this pastimes of this merciful nature. Okay, so that's what I thought when that they just said that those words. When had Krishna actually done this, or were these merely stories? So without proper understanding of Krishna's position, we might relish the stories, but deep in our subconscious, we might think they're just merely stories. Peter Pan and the Lost Boys. Is that what they call the Lost Boys? Yeah. So are they just merely stories, some adventurous stories? So next verse, 10:11:3. Ulukalam vikarshantam damna bhada chabalakam kasyedam kutak ascharyam upatati itikataraha. Krishna was bound by the rope to the ulukala, the mortar, which he was dragging. But how could he actually pull down those trees? Who had actually done it? Where was the source of this incident? Considering all these things, the cowherd men were doubtful and bewildered. Purport. The cowherd men were very agitated because the child, Krishna, after all, had been standing between the two trees. And if by chance the trees had fallen upon him, he would have been smashed. But he was standing as he was, and still things had happened. So who had done all this? How could these events have happened in such a wonderful way? These considerations were some of the reasons they were agitated and bewildered. They thought, however, that by chance Krishna had been saved by God, so nothing had happened to him. We got our last verse. Bala uchur aneneti tirya gatam ululukam vikarshata madhyagena purushav api achakshmahi. Then all the cowherd boys said, "It is Krishna who had done this." When he was in between the two trees, the mortar fell crosswise. Krishna dragged the mortar. First, Krishna, he pulled the mortar, and he was pulling to pull the trees down, and he fell back because the mortar was pushing harder than Krishna. So the rope went slack because both the mortar and the rope became spiritually alive by the touch of Krishna. This is that's why what is that verse we sing in the Dhammaraska? Damne, we offer obeisances to the rope. Actually, so our acharyas described that the rope, the mortar, they all became alive and they had wonderful pastimes. Sometimes the cowherd boys are watching from the field. They're watching Krishna what's going to happen? And they said, look, looks like the motor is moving on its own. It was just, walking across the grass on its own. Sometimes Krishna was pulling it, sometimes it was coming on its own. And so the motor didn't want Krishna's hands to be hurt by the strenuous pull of the rope. So he pushed really hard. And when he pushed really hard, Krishna fell back, pulling on that rope. After that, 2 beautiful men came out of the trees. We had seen this with our own eyes. Purport. It's the last purport. It's got long purport, 2 sentences. Krishna's playmates wanted to inform Krishna's father of the exact situation by explaining that not only did the trees break, but out of the broken trees came 2 beautiful men. All these things happened, they said. We have seen with our own eyes. Okay. So there's a book called Sri Damodar Janani. It is put together by His Holiness Shivaram Swami. It's, I think we said last time, it's like an 800 or 400 page book. You see the pastime of Damodar in Krishna book is quite short. It's just a few pages. But he takes so many references because there's the Gaudiya Vaishnava literature is very, very, very vast. And so he has all these pastimes. For the Damodar pastime, there's so much that's there. And so I can read a little there, like. One second. Where is my... Any reflections or comments?
I'd like to reflect. I really appreciate your point about the external lila, about the importance of the external lila, Krishna's interaction with the external energy. Without it, we may take Krishna's internal lila as a mere story. I really like that point. Very nice. Thank you.
Okay, so here
we have a comment from Adipur Prabhu.
Oh yes, please.
Hare Krishna. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah. We hear these pastimes of Krishna in the Bhagavatam. And then there's the Lilamrita with Prabhupada's activities, And as far as I can understand, you can correct me, that these activities of Krishna's Hare Krishna movement are like an extension of the Srimad Bhagavatam, that this is also something Krishna's doing, right? That's wonderful and attractive and can be included like another volume of another canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam. And it occurs to me, years ago there was what's his name? He wrote that book, Steal This Book. Remember that?
Abhi.
What's his name? Abbie Hoffman?
Yeah.
No, not Abbie. Somebody, a contemporary of Abbie Hoffman. Oh, doesn't matter. Anyway, a pastime of Krishna's with this devotee, with his character in the counterculture, wrote a book called Steal This Book. You know, remember that book?
I've heard it.
You heard of it? You looking? What's his name? It doesn't matter.
It's Abhi Hoffman.
You think so?
Yes, it is.
Yeah. Anyway, they used to keep the book behind the cash register at the bookstore because people would steal it. It's a book about how to live in a city like New York without spending any money. Go to the dumpsters and get the old yogurt and things like that. And then it says one pastime, when you need a new pair of shoes, go to the Sunday feast at the Hare Krishna temple and leave early. Go to the Hare Krishna. So I met some people, some friends of mine, who, when I was there, they read that in the book, go to the Hare Krishna temple and go to the Sunday feast. So they heard about the Hare Krishna temple by Krishna's arrangement. And they both became devotees. When I was at Vrindavan, they wrote to me and said, tell Adi that we actually joined the movement. So Krishna is working in funny ways with all kinds of people and somehow or other to broadcast the holy name and attract people to some way to connect with the Hare Krishna movement. And then he rescues us one by one. I'm not sure if you can see that as a contribution to like what we're talking about here, but Krishna's still working. That's the point. And he's still doing curious things that are an exhibition of his love for us and hilarious, reaching out. Hare Krishna.
Thank you. I heard Imjaduma Swami tell, I think it's the same book. Yeah, he said that the gypsies in Europe also had the same book. And it is, if you want shoes, go to the Hare Krishna temple. That's where you mute it out.
And leave early.
Leave early. As soon as you get your plate. Don't forget the free food, yeah. Okay, I wanted to read some of the demigods speaking about the rope. The demigods were having a debate. When Mother Yashoda was putting the ropes around Krishna, they were having a debate whether it was possible. Can she do it? And most were like, there's no way she's going to wrap a rope. Some were like, wait, doesn't she put jewelry on him every day? And then others were like, how can you put a rope around the universe? How can you put a rope around everything? How's that even possible? And so they were looking at this whole situation and they were completely confused. Okay, so I'll just read a little bit. This is a quote. One should not try to understand by logic that which is inconceivable. That object which is beyond material nature is called inconceivable. Let us recall that Mother Yashoda looked into the mouth of her medium-sized boy and saw within him the infinite universe. She also saw his divine form. Now I ask you, O wise ones, what was the size of the Lord that she saw? Again, the demigods laughed in wonder. Some said infinitesimal, others said infinite, still others said inconceivable. So when it went on, let's be honest, the Lord is far beyond our ability to understand him. Not only did Yashoda see the Lord as infinite within the medium-sized mouth, but according to our creator Brahma, Krishna exists in his fullness with all of his potencies and every infinitesimal atom. Can any of us comprehend that? Someone asked, the universe, along with each and every one of us, is present in every atom? Yes. And again, we are present within Lord Krishna in each of every of the atoms in each of the universe, within every atom, and so on, ad infinitum. Inconceivable, said the demigods and laughed. Let's just say Lord Krishna exists in his own transcendental form, which remains forever inconceivable to the greatest of minds. First looking at each other, and then at Yashoda Devi, the celestials sang in chorus, and she wants to encircle Krishna with a cord and tie him to a mortar. That would be truly inconceivable. One great demigod said, it would, but it's quite likely that we will see it. How can you say such an extraordinary thing? Because in the same way that the power of the Lord's grace makes his unmanifested form visible to our eyes, it is most likely by that same grace he will enable Queen Yashoda to bind him. And by that same grace still, we may well grant us the eyes to see that happen. The demigods were eager to know what teaching would be imparted to them by such a pastime. But before they could ask, another topic emerged. How was the unmanifested Lord known to the intelligence minor senses? So they conversed. The Lord is adhokshaja, transcendental to knowledge gained by the senses, gross and subtle. So he can only be seen by his special grace. Indeed, everything that we conditioned souls experience is made possible by the agency of his potencies. But that is the common mercy. What is the biggest chapter in Krishna book? That's my just pausing there. Can somebody tell me what's the biggest chapter in the Krishna book?
Yeah.
Sometimes we want to do a chapter a day of Krishna book, but then there's one that's huge.
Is it the prayers by the demigods?
Yes, prayers by the personified Vedas. And in that chapter, the personified Vedas they have the same question. How can the Lord be revealed through sound, through these Vedic mantras, if the medium is material? And so it's a big question. And then the answer is given that actually, even though you're hearing sound with your material ears, this energy is extending from the Supreme Personality of Godhead. It all has its original spiritual connection. Okay, so I'm continuing on with this.
Hey, Prabhu, when it says, how could he be bound up? Doesn't the name Damodar mean bound by love? He wasn't actually bound by rope, but by love, right? Doesn't Damodar mean that? I forget.
Well, Dhamma means rope,
Oh, Dhamma means
and Udara means belly.
I see.
But what kind of rope was he bound with? The rope of love.
Mother Jasoda's love.
Yes. Actually, it was specifically, she pulled out her hair, the ties, her rope. Indeed, everything that we conditioned souls experience is made possible by the agency of his potencies. But that is his common mercy. Yes, beyond this material energy nature lies his eternal spiritual nature, which is unmanifested, avyaktam, even those who have his common mercy. Therefore, it requires his special mercy to see him in his original transcendental form. I just want to say that this book has been made into an audio book. It's available for free on SoundCloud. It's called Sri Damodar Janani. There's two versions. I would get the one that says chapters only, because if you start with the beginning part with the introduction, there's a lot of it you can kind of get lost because there's like bullet points, and some of those things are hard to follow in an audio book. Chapters only is pretty much the pastimes with and philosophy, but it flows much easier.
Prabhu, where do you go looking for that? Where do you look for that again?
SoundCloud. I can share it here. Let me see. I can share one. Let me see. Copy link. This is for the chapter that we're going over today. Oh, there's one. But SoundCloud, Sri Damodara Janani, chapters only. And it is myself doing the audiobook, but it did come out pretty good. It does sound professional, and spend a lot of time on it. So, and it's free. You can hear. So if you you don't have the book at home, you can start right away. This is
Thank you very
nice.
much, Prabhu. The whole thing of having books on tape, the Bhagavatam, Chaitanya Charitamrita, done by Bhakti Vedanta book, right? And you as well. That's it's great for people who have their hands full all day and can listen to these classes and these books. It's just such a wonderful offering. Thank you very much, Prabhu.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a really beautiful book. It's something you want to hear leading up or during the Kartik month, a whole month of celebrating Krishna's Damodar pastime, how he is conquered by the love of his devotees. So I'll see any more comments, reflections, takeaways. Okay, so should I continue reading? Okay. The demigods hinted earlier that they may see Damodar Leela now continued. Behold that beautiful child possessed of a human-like form, Martya Lingam. That is the original form of Godhead. The fact that we see him indicates that we're recipients of some degree of special mercy. You hear in, I think it is in Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's commentary in the Bhagavad Gita and the universal form pastime. You know this part where he says, I'll give you divine eyes. Now, if Arjuna is already a pure devotee, he's already an associate of the Lord, what kind of eyes does he need to see the universal form? Isn't he already seeing the highest form of the Lord, Krishna himself? Like, sometimes you watch, if you ever watch some Japanese anime, some cartoon, and they're fighting, and and the guy powers up, and then he says, "This is not even my supreme form." He's like, you haven't even seen me at my best yet. And so Krishna he's the supreme form. So how is it that Arjuna, what does it mean that he was given divine eyes to see this universal form? And so Acharyas explained that he's given demigod eyes. It's taking a step down. He's given the perception of the demigods to see this universal form. Okay, so the demigods are continuing. Is that why you suggest that we may be privileged to see his pastime? Yes, but our privilege does not match that of Queen Yashoda, who truly thinks that he is an ordinary child. Why is that? Because our qualification to see him is a consequence of our service, whereas her qualification to see him is a consequence of her love. Service gives us the privilege of knowing his majesty, while love gives her the privilege of knowing his sweetness. Is the superior of spontaneous love over regulated service the lesson to be learned in this pastime? Yes, that is it. May the Lord instruct us in the way that he has planned. In agreeing to this conclusion, the demigods became silent and turned their attention to Mother Yashoda and her son. What would she do? They hoped that they could see. Yashoda was intent on binding her son. Nevertheless, she could not feel compassion for him. She could not but feel compassion for him. And always, she could not but be absorbed in thinking of him. Gazing at his human-like form, she thought, how has the Creator fashioned such an excellent form, whose limbs of unmatched softness, beauty, and sweetness? Although he appeared to be crushed by a cart when he was a baby, by the grace of the Lord, my son was saved. I will now bind that same child with a rope. May Lord Narayan forgive my transgressions. treating him in a way that a mother treats an ordinary child. Yashoda set about binding Krishna. But she was no ordinary mother, and he was no ordinary child. He was Adhokshaja, one who was beyond all sense perception, who by submitting to the overwhelming influence of Yashoda's love became further known as Avyakta, the one who concealed inconceivable powers to appear like a human being. While Krishna would agree to subordinate himself to Yashoda, he would not do so without some resistance. Did she think he could be so easily humiliated? Mother, do you think it's right for you to punish me like this? If you were someone else's child, I would not. But since you're my responsibility, I cannot neglect your education. If I do, then who will teach you right from wrong? Krishna had an answer for that argument. His more lenient father would educate him. And no doubt Nandaraj would not make such a fuss about a little spilt yogurt. Now, he completely trashed the place, him and the monkeys, and all kinds of trouble. Thinking better of voicing his thoughts, Krishna said, but does my mischief warrant such severe punishment? Dear son, this morning, you were more than mischievous. Was I? You were offensive, an aparadi. Krishna was offended. An offender? Yes, and your punishment must be appropriate to your offense. So it was time for Krishna to be tethered to the mortar. By the arrangement of providence, the first lengths of the cord that Yashoda drew were from her hair, were too short for what she needed. Therefore, she called some maidservants to bring more rope, while securely holding Krishna's hand with her own. Krishna was fuming. He thought, I do not want to be bound up, nor do I have time for such things. I have to play with and houses to raid. These are my daily activities, and I'm duty bound to accomplish. It's my dharma. How can I be restrained by a rope? Yashoda Devi said, now stand still. While Krishna rubbed his eyes in frustration, she let go of his hand, knotted a new rope from the hair cord, and then extended the length, and with the extended length, encircled him. Well, almost. There's a common expression to indicate that something is just a little too short, or when the two ends just do not meet. That aphorism is called dviangulam, short by 2 fingers. To be exact, it means to be short by the width of 2 fingers. So I think we're here at 8 o'clock. Guess we'll keep on reading until we hear the conch blow. When Yashoda Devi tried to tie the knots of the ropes around Krishna's belly, it was dviangulam, short by 2 fingers. How strange, she thought. My joined hair ties were just a little shorter than his girth. But the churning rope I added was more than enough to compensate for that deficit. Now even the combined length remains insufficient. Yashoda Devi paused and then thought, perhaps I made the knots too big. But on closer inspection, they did not appear so. Anyway, what can be done? I will add another piece. As she reached for another length of rope, Mother Yashoda caught Lavanga's doe-like eyes and their startled look that said, how? Very strange. Perhaps it was strange. But housekeeping was waiting, and there was no time to waste. Grasping the rope, she tied it to the rest and pulled it taut. There. But it was still too short. Now that is strange. There is another figurative way of expressing shortage between 2 ends, and that is called chanaka adi, the distance of 2 chickpeas. An indefinite but small distance. Yashoda Devi was suspicious that this inability to secure Krishna to the mortar was due to some mystic power, his or someone else's. Afraid. Jai Shri Damodar Ki. Shri Radha Mulidar Ki. Shri Gaura Chandra Ki.
Jai.
Thank you, Nityananda Chandra Prabhu. Great class. Manji, if you can hear us, please move the camera up just a little bit.
Can someone raise the camera?
Raised. And we're that we're always eager to have more people have. Thank you. Have a wonderful Thursday, everybody. Come to Kirtan at the Bhakti or keep your bhajan going wherever you are. Central Maine. Very good.